Hello, heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the witch's wheel of the year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. Hello, witches, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Spinning the Wheel podcast. It is I, your briny host, Megan Angus. We have a lot to talk about this week. We are going to skip through a lot of really good stuff. We're going to focus on some of it. Notes for the patrons, I'll get it. Okay, but hi, welcome to me, always on a tangent. Okay. Let's talk about the preamble stuff first, and then we'll get into what all we're getting into this week. First and foremost, I am going to be at Bumbershoot Saturday and Sunday this year. Bumbershoot 2023, in the Witches Temple, reading tarot, sliding scale. 5 to 15 minutes. I never do readings that short. So super cheapo way to get a reading with me. Probably my only in-person offering for tarot this year, probably. So if you're at Bumbershoot, come by, say hi. Come check out the community altar that we are going to be putting up. All of this is being put together by Ilva and Kiki over at The Living Altar. Thank you so much to those two absolute queen witches for all of the work that they are putting into this project. It's going to be really incredible. Our next Wheel of the Year class, September 12th. This will be Mabon, Fall Equinox, Second Harvest. We're going to get into it like we always do. This will be a live stream over on my YouTube channel. Please join us. Heckle me in chat if you dare. These live streams are free thanks to the support of my patrons, who are a bunch of maniacs, honestly. You know who you are, and you're a bunch of freaks. So if you're a freak, join my Patreon. Folks who subscribe to Patreon at the Mercury level, which is $5 a month and up, get access to the notes from these podcasts every week. It has charts for our moons and a bunch of stuff that we don't necessarily talk about in the podcast. Folks who subscribe at the Venus level, that's $9 a month and higher, get access to the Patreon bag of holding, wherein you will find the recordings for Tarot Circle, which happens just about every month, not quite, but almost, and all the slides that go with the tarot circles, as well as the workbooks, the calendars, the digital altars, the digital spells, the playlists, etc., for each of the Wheel of the Year classes. So, big prizes in store for those who subscribe to Patreon. Thank you so much to my patrons. Tarot Circle will be most likely September 26th this month, also on a Tuesday. This is going to be a collective reading for fall. So all patrons, regardless of what level you are subscribed at, all patrons are welcome to attend Tarot Circle for free. And the more the merrier. We do get up to some shenanigans over there in Tarot Circle. Is that everything? I think that's everything. I'm so excited about Bumbershoot this weekend. It's going to be so dope. I really am. I'm also out of my mind because of this full moon that we're having. So I really don't know where I am in space and time. I'm going to show up at Seattle Center like 4 days after Bumbershoot. Like, where is everybody? What's going on? Did I miss it? That wouldn't surprise me at all. All right. that's all of that stuff. Let's get into what the heck it is that we are doing this week. We are looking at Lughnasadh season, super full blue moon in Pisces, lunar week 22, auspicious by some lunar calendars, as we do talk about. To ground us briefly into our Lughnasadh work, we in this Sabbath season are focusing on power, maturation, leadership, production, and experiences that bring our focus to those subjects, and perhaps challenge us to work on those issues in our lives. Okay, so what are we starting the week with? We are starting Wednesday, August 30th, 2023, 6:35 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day / the next day for everybody else around the planet, with a super full blue moon in Pisces at 7 degrees. And this moon is conjunct, more or less, Saturn at 3 degrees of Pisces. So that's a lot of words for a full moon. What does all of that stuff mean? Okay. When we are talking about a super moon, what we are saying is that this is the largest appearing moon of the year. The moon's orbit around our planet wobbles a little bit. And so at times it is closer to Earth and at times it is further away. When it is at its closest, it is a super moon. We don't always get a super full, or well, we do. What am I talking about? Full moons and new moons are the moons where we measure the super moon or the micro moon. Micro moon being the new moon or the full moon that is the furthest away from Earth, so it appears to be a little bit smaller than the rest of the moons of the year. Okay, so that's the super part. The full part, I think we're all relatively familiar with, but just for the astronomy of it all, when our moon is full, it is because it is opposite the sun in the sky. And so we are getting the full face of the moon reflecting the sun's light back to us at maximum volume. That's what's happening at a full moon. So astrologically, yes, on a full moon, the sun and moon are opposed to each other. That's interesting, huh? Kind of explains some of the reputation of a full moon. When we think about the magic that we're doing, or the reputation that it has for, the types of energies and the way that people react and behave on a full moon and all of that stuff. Yeah. Okay. So what other word do we have here? We have a blue moon. And blue moons can happen for a couple of different reasons. There's a few different definitions that can make a moon blue, and there is no one standard. So they're kind of all correct. They all count, basically. The definition we are going with this time is that this is the second full moon in the month of August. We had a full moon on Lughnasadh on August 1st, and we have a full moon to round out the month here on August 30th. So this moon is in Pisces. Pisces is the 12th sign of the zodiac, water sign, mutable sign, and Pisces is the cosmic sea. Pisces is boundaryless, and it's the place where the individual dissolves into the all. Pisces contains a lot of experiences that are like the ineffable side of God, the unknowable side of God, or the unseeable side of God, or the parts of our spirituality that can't be expressed in words. But Pisces can also hold a lot of stuff around things that aren't supposed to be said out loud, or that we feel shameful or embarrassed to say out loud. Pisces can be a very emotional experience for us, but emotional in a way that's hard to explain to other people, or even really make any sort of logical sense to ourselves. Because again, it's sort of where we dissolve into the everything. So all at the same time, Pisces energy can contain experiences that feel rapturous or very sorrowful, and maybe even at the same time. Um, so there can be an ephemeral, bittersweet, cosmic, expansive, and yet vast and vaguely spooky element, all at the same time with Pisces. Pisces is the vast ocean. It is the depths of the ocean. It is the darkness of the ocean. We know more about the moon than we know about the bottom of the ocean on our own planet. If that's any indication of where we are, right? Water in a lot of our magical systems and in tarot systems represents our emotional world, our intuitive world, our psychic and spiritual world and experiences, whatever those words mean for you. And so again, thinking about that as a metaphor, like, we know more about the moon than we know about the bottom of the ocean. Like, oh yes. So when we have a full moon in our plant metaphor that we are working with every week, actually, before I talk about that, I'm going to talk about this. The fact that this moon is conjunct Saturn is important because Saturn is traveling through Pisces currently. It's hanging out in this sign for 2.5 years. It's already been here for 6 months ish. Uh, and we've already had some very interesting experiences with Saturn hanging out in Pisces. We've had, the orcas unionizing the mammals of the ocean and staging an attack on humanity, which finally, honestly, right? We had, Ocean Gate, the Titanic submersible thing happen, et cetera, et cetera. We've had a variety of different world experiences that have been very interesting metaphors for Saturn moving through Pisces. But Saturn in Pisces is the phrases that I keep coming back to describe this 2.5 year transit of Saturn through Pisces is, or are, the container that is strong enough to hold the ocean. What is the vessel that can hold the fantasy? And what is the container that is strong enough to hold back the abyss, or not, as the case may be? And so Saturn's work through here is difficult but necessary work because Saturn wants to bring structure, boundaries, architecture, a skeleton to a thing. And it wants to bring longevity to something. And it wants to say, like, we're going to build something that's of lasting value and it's going to stand the test of time and it's safety minded and it's stable. And Pisces is like, I don't do boundaries. I don't do time, like, you want to build something that'll stand the test of time. I don't even believe in time. And so these are two astrological ideas that are not exactly in opposition to each other, but they're very different from each other. Saturn wants boundaries and Pisces is boundaryless. And so it's this opportunity, but a difficult opportunity, to again create a vessel that is strong enough to contain the cosmic sea, and to create a vessel that could contain the fantasy. And a lot of what Saturn's job has been in this role has been to help us find the compromise, to shave off a little of the fantasy here and trim off a little of the fantasy there, so that Saturn is like, this is actually now something that's a little more realistic, and so a little less fantastical, right? But it's a little more realistic, and I can actually do something with this. I can actually make something happen with this. So this full moon is a very rare, interesting moment within the season of the harvest, within the sun's passage through Virgo, to sort of reap a little bit of the work, right? The effects of the work that we've done so far. Um, and 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 what is that for? What are we doing with that, right? Like, where are we in our emotional process? Where are we in our spiritual process? um what work have we been doing here, and what effects can we sort of account or register out of that work that we have been doing. And that's a per person thing, right? There's no universal standard to like, you should have gotten this far in your PTSD or whatever it is, right? Like that's not how that works. So it's a per person thing. But Saturn can bring a real seriousness, a real heaviness, a morose energy sometimes to stuff, even if we're still into it. It can just be that the energy is like dampened a little bit, or the seriousness of things maybe are ramped up a little bit. Um, but in general, I think that this could be a really lovely full moon. And in general, I think that this is a beautiful time to do journaling and to do dream work and to engage in anything that feels spiritual and mystical and fantastical and dreamy and nebulous and feels a little hazy around the edges and all of that type of stuff. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a super great moon for like doing heavy hard drugs. And again, you know what that means for you. I think light substance use might be nice, or things that are a little more, upbeat or whatever might be cool here. But that leadenness from Saturn might make things that feel down, like really, really down. And Pisces, again, in its boundarylessness, is like, let's go all the way. And that's not necessarily a safe thing to do. Keep a little Narcan around. I don't know how you party. I'm just saying. Just saying. Friends and loved ones, let's make it through to the finish line. So that's the vibes, I think, for this Pisces full moon. Dreamy. Maybe it's not like the rock and roll riot that you were hoping for the this particular full moon, but it's still a very beautiful vibe. Now, something important here is this is our last full moon of summer. So take a moment in whatever way you do throughout this week and, kind of pause and look back and think to yourself, what business of summer is still left unattended that I need to attend to in the next 2 weeks or so. Take a moment and think about your Lughnasadh work and think about if any of that work has been left unattended and if there's something that you want to touch there before in these next 2 weeks before we leave Lughnasadh season. This is the 10-minute little flashing light, on the corner of the stage, letting you know you got 10 minutes before it's time to change. And we're going to be heading out and doing something else here in a minute. But for now, drink deep because these are the last days and hours of summer. So with our full moon in our plant metaphor that we work with every month, the full moon is the moment that a fruit appears on the vine. Now, a fruit is not ready to eat the moment that it appears on the vine, but it is a sign that something has been happening. All that work was not for nothing. Here is some results for you. And this particular moon is usually called the harvest moon. It's also sometimes called a full corn moon or a barley moon, the scarlet plum moon, the fruit moon. The full moon that is closest to the fall equinox is traditionally called the harvest moon, and that would be this one. And as I said, this is the last full moon of summer. So for our full moon in Pisces, we are ultimately a little bit more sensitive to people's hurts. We might be feeling more sensitive to our own hurts, but we are also more sensitive and aware to other people's pain. And This is a time to find a capacity in ourselves to be a healer to others, um, as well as extending love to healers in our community. These people, metaphorically and physically, at this time of year, are doing a lot of work, but stepping out of just our magical symbolism. Over the last few years, healers of all modalities have been on the front lines. It is wild on earth right now. And it is wild to be any kind of a healer on earth right now. And so saying thank you, and I'm going to mention this again at the end of the podcast, but saying thank you in any ways that feel appropriate to any of the healers in your life is very, very potent magic right now. Letting them know that they are loved, that they are supported, that they're seen, um, that they are treasured, that they are valuable members of the community. It's hard out there right now for our healers, and so letting them know that they are treasured members of the community and that you are better for working with them. Very, very important right now. Okay, so with our full moon in Pisces, for our lunar body work, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, or otherwise restoring the legs, especially, specifically, the ankles and the feet. The feet, in particular, are ruled by Pisces. And as I say, every single week, I am not a doctor of the human corpus. I am a doctor of, I don't know, the cosmic sea, I guess, this week. So check with your trusted health advisor if you're wanting to integrate any of this information, and also always encouraging you to work with the metaphor. And so, are you walking through broken glass right now? Are you walking on hot coals? Are you walking on eggshells? Is that something to be thinking about? Are you on your path? Are you, towing the line, right? All of those feet metaphors that we have to work with, very appropriate here. For our plant body work, if you are planting anything, plant roots, except potatoes, unless you are into the potatoes of revolution and rebellion. If you know, you know. But this is a great time for watering and irrigating, and or looking at your watering and irrigating systems and making any adjustments or repairs if that's necessary. Grafting, layering, taking cuttings. We are planting biennials. We're planting perennials, bulbs, roots, trees, grapes, berries, potatoes, shrubs. This is also a great time for pulling weeds. This is a great time for cutting trees for firewood or lumber. Great time for plowing, cultivating, great time for pruning trees and vines in particular. And I would say also that if you are growing viney plants in your house, this is a great time for trimming them and creating cuttings off of those trimmings. Good time for pest and disease control. Our weather is starting to shift. And then if we're doing any harvesting, we are still within the massive season of harvest, but on this particular moon, below ground crops specifically that we are going to dry and store. Okay, so we are going to jump around a little bit like we have the last couple of weeks, because we have very, very little astrology to talk about, and we have a very interesting series of fixed stars and a collection of holy days that I want to focus on. So, first off, the astrology for this day, the moon enters Pisces. That's it. We have a full moon in Pisces. Hooray. Enjoy. Okay. So briefly, I'm going to actually jump to the other moon. See, here's me. I'm jumping. As I said, I'm going to jump around for this week. So we're going to jump to Sunday, September 3rd, 12:27 a.m. We have a disseminating moon in Aries at 25 degrees, and it is conjunct the Aries North Node at 25 degrees. And so it is also going to be opposing the Libra South Node at 25 degrees and conjunct Chiron retrograde at 19 degrees of Aries. Potent stuff. This is really powerful because, in my opinion, maybe it's not really powerful, but I think it's got some oomph behind it because the disseminating moon is our phase that comes after the full moon. And the disseminating moon in our metaphor that we work with every month or every lunar cycle is the fruit ripens, time to reap the rewards. And so our disseminating moons that we experience 2 to 3 days after the full moons that happen throughout Lughnasadh, Mabon, and Samhain season are all the like harvesting moons of the harvesting season big time. It is the reaping moons, right? We think of the full moons as that, but really it's the moon that's a couple days later. It's the lunar phase that's a couple days later. Oftentimes what we see appear at the full moon does not actually begin to play out until, or settle down until here now, a couple, 3 days afterwards during the disseminating moon. So this moon is in Aries. The disseminating moon in Aries really is focused on working within a group toward a goal. Even if you don't necessarily get along with that group, you collectively have decided to fight for something. And that commonality and that goal is the binding factor. And at least for now, there is this sense of, let's let bygones be bygones and put our stuff aside and just focus on winning this battle or dealing with this problem. And in particular, there is encouraged a very heavy charitable group-minded, group-centric attitude. And it's very interesting to me because this is the full moon in Aries, right? Aries is very I, me, mine. It's conjunct Aries in the North Node. Again, more so of an emphasis of I, me, mine, and actually opposing Libra in the South Node, or the Libra South Node, excuse me, which is very we, us. So to think of this full moon as something that's really emphasizing, no, you've got to get over yourself and come into alignment with the group temporarily so that we collectively can achieve a goal that we probably won't be able to achieve in solo efforts. And that idea of like mutual support versus solo effort is also something that is ringing true for our full moon energy. And in the sense of like, calling in feedback from the universe and listening to it and then working collectively towards, whatever that feedback is pointing to. And so this moon also is like, hey, let's really get dialed in on collectively what we need to be getting done and start fighting for that. And we can deal with each other and the smaller stuff later. Or maybe not, right? We get the job done. We all go back to our little corners. But yeah, that's what's up with this disseminating moon in Aries. That's Sunday, September 3rd. For our lunar body work, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, or otherwise restoring the head, the hair, the scalp, the eyes, the sinuses. This is a great time if you are wanting to reduce anything on your scalp for making a tonic or a hair wash for yourself. So if you have skin issues and you're hoping for them to go away, great time to make a tonic to reduce the inflammation. If you have, gray hairs, for example, which goddess bless, but some folks don't like them, and you are wanting to make a hair tonic to wash the gray out, this is a great time for that as well. For our plant body work, we are pulling weeds, cutting trees for firewood and lumber. We are plowing, cultivating, pruning trees and vines. We're doing pest and disease control. We are harvesting below ground crops for drying and storage. And if we're doing any planting, we're planting biennials, perennials, bulbs, roots, trees, grapes, berries, potatoes, and shrubs. Okay. Now, let's get into our fixed stars and our holy days for this week. Oh, and a little bit of astrology. We'll do the astrology first. But before that, how about an ad? Okay. If you love this podcast, you can support this work through Patreon. Thank you a bajillion billion times. See, the sirens are going off even as I say it. Thank you so much to my patrons. You guys don't even know. You don't even know. Thank you so much. You can sub for as little as $1 if you just think this podcast is dope and you want to support it. I don't run ads on the podcast, partly because I don't want to, and partly because I won't get paid even if I do. So screw them, man. You can sub, as I said, for as little as $1 or $5, even if you want to just support the podcast. And this is plenty of information. But if you want even more information, extra podcasts, extra videos, extra information about the Wheel of the Year, magical practices, tarot, etc., subbing at the higher levels, you get all kinds of cool free stuff. And at the even higher levels, you get free readings every month with me to be able to integrate all of this information into your personal life based on what's going on in your natal chart and all of that other good stuff. Join and change your life forever. Or, whatever. Thanks so much for the support. If you can't support financially, I completely understand because life sucks on Earth right now. It's too expensive for everything. Tell a friend, share it on social media, give it a thumbs up. If you're feeling especially hedonistic, you can leave a rating or a review. All right, that's the end of the ad. Let's get back to the podcast. Okay, so I said we were going to talk about astrology first because we have almost none of it this week. I mean, it's there's not a lot at all. Okay. September 1st is when the moon actually moves into Aries. And then we have our disseminating moon in Aries on Sunday the 3rd. Also on Sunday the 3rd at 6:20 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day / next day for everybody else, around the planet, we have our dear sweet planet Venus stationing direct at 12 degrees of Leo. Now, reports from the field have been coming in hot and heavy. Folks have had all kinds of experiences with this Venus retrograde. And I personally think that at least in part has to do with Venus in this retrograde cycle is kind of doing a dance with Jupiter and with Uranus. Now, Uranus is going to bring in the what? Right? Who expected that? Dirk. So I think surprising and unexpected stuff came up for people during this retrograde, and will take a little while to resolve. Right? We are going to go through the what Jessica Lanyadoo refers to as the retro shade, as Venus re-travels all those degrees it just went backwards through. It's now stationing direct and going to appear to begin to move forward again, and it's going to roll back through all those degrees. And so it's going to make all those transits again. It's going to make all those aspects again. And so it's been having this multi-part conversation with Uranus and a multi-part conversation with Jupiter. So Uranus brings the who saw that coming, and Jupiter brings the sure, why not, more is more. And so things that were going good might have gone better. Things that were going bad might have gotten worse or appeared to get worse, because that's what Jupiter's job is it just makes everything bigger, more of that, whatever it is. So it sounds like folks have had experiences all across the board with this Venus retrograde. I personally have had almost no obvious experiences with this retrograde. Some retrograde cycles are all up in my face. And this one has been very mellow, despite the fact that it is aspecting nearly every single thing in my chart, including angles. And I was like, that seems like more than enough. And yet, I'm gonna knock on wood because honestly, thank God. Right? Like, no news is good news. I would love it if Venus had brought me, I don't know, some lovin'. That would have been cute. Or some cash. That'd be nice. And mostly it brought less of both of those things. But also it's 2023. So, there's that. But this planet will be stationing direct on this day. And so the days when planets are stationing retrograde and stationing direct oftentimes are the days where we feel the effects the strongest, or we feel, a disturbance in the force. Ugh. Uh, and so just pay attention on this day. Venusian stuff can come up in our self-worth, inner dialogue. It can come up in our values and how we express our values, or how we behave around our values. It can come up in, oh, I can't find anything to wear. And it can also come up in like, our love-oriented relationships. Venus retrograde, Venus direct can also be days where we are tempted to spend more than we ought to. So it might be a day that you just need to pay a little close attention to what am I doing exactly with my money on this day. But probably is going to pass relatively chill unless you've been having a terrible Venus retrograde cycle. And then this might be the final like shudder before things begin to calm down. Okay, moving on to September 4th, we have our two other pieces of astrology, basically. Let's see. September 3rd, also, we had our disseminating moon in Aries, but then later in the evening or later in the morning, the moon moves into Taurus. Okay. So Monday, September 4th, we have Mercury retrograde in Virgo, trine Jupiter in Taurus at 15 degrees. And then just about 4 hours later, Jupiter stations retrograde at 15 degrees of Taurus. Now, as an aside, this is an interesting thing because Jupiter is stationing retrograde basically 12-ish hours after Jupiter or Venus stations direct. Jupiter and Venus are in traditional astrology referred to as the lesser benefic and the greater benefic. They are the planets that are thought of as bringing the boons, bringing the gifts. And so for a lot of folks that I've talked to, one of the ways that the Venus retrograde has manifested has been a big time slowdown in their work, in the amount of money that they are making in the industry that they work in. And that may continue, unfortunately, or it may continue in a different way. But that's not always what a Jupiter retrograde means. Jupiter, again, is the planet of more equals more. And so Jupiter sometimes the Jupiter retrograde sometimes it brings us an opportunity to talk to ourselves about how much do we need, how much do we want, is more really more, is less really less, and sometimes yes, right? Sometimes it's very straightforward, right? Like if we get a pay cut and we haven't increased our spending, we just get a pay cut. That's not cool. But ultimately, Jupiter retrogrades are an opportunity for us to think about expansion and when is it appropriate and when is it appropriate to hold steady or even contract. Right? We have multiple choices here. And Jupiter is philosophical. It's expansive in its thinking. It's progressive in its thinking. It's future oriented, but in the sense of being very optimistic and hopeful. But again, it's very philosophical into being very spiritual and religious. And so sometimes Jupiter retrograde can bring up conversations around dogma versus religious conversation. Um, and where are we leaning on dogma versus utilizing critical thinking, even in spaces like religion and spiritual experiences. So Jupiter retrograde, it can be an interesting time where luck and fated things happen, kind of pop out of the woodwork. The days, tell you a little secret just between me and you. Don't tell everybody this, all right? Okay. Uh, the days that Jupiter stations direct or retrograde are my favorite days to go look for four-leaf clovers. Right? Trippy, right? I don't want to say I always find them, but I have a high percentage chance of finding them on those days. And maybe you will too. And that to me is an interesting thing. There's also something about like, you know, again, Jupiter like revealing this part of itself that it's normally not revealing. Um so opportunity, and it's going to be, I should say this as well. Jupiter is stationing retrograde at 15 degrees. It's going to go back to 5 degrees of Taurus. And this is important because back in May, when Mercury stationed retrograde, when Mercury had its retrograde cycle in Taurus, it also traveled from 15 degrees to 5 degrees. Take a moment to look at the symbol for Mercury and the symbol of Taurus. The Taurus symbol is the head of Mercury. Whoa, right? Wait a minute, what? So there is a very cool and interesting extended dialogue for us astrologically this year around whatever was going on for us with the Mercury retrograde in Taurus. And now we're sort of revisiting that conversation from another angle with Jupiter moving through those same degrees in its retrograde cycle. It's going to be in retrograde from September 4th through December 30th. So right up to the very end of the year. Also quite auspicious to have Jupiter stationed direct right as we are about to head into 2024. So that's kind of a cool aspect to play with and work with. But, think back to May. What came up for you during that Mercury retrograde when Mercury was hanging out in Taurus? Perhaps some of that stuff is going to be revisited, but again, through a different lens with this Jupiter retrograde. And again, remember, I am not saying that the planets are making anything happen. I am a believer that the planets represent cycles that we go through. So Jupiter represents our conversations around abundance, extravagance, spirituality versus dogma, philosophical expansion versus navel gazing, etc., etc. Right? Jupiter wants to travel, it wants to know stuff, it wants to meet people from far places and hear about exotic things and enjoy tasty foods and wear opulent clothes, and it wants to just be enriched by life. But yes, we can have too much of a good thing. And sometimes more does not mean better, right? Sometimes refining and paring back actually reveals the treasures and the most opulent stuff. So again, Jupiter retrogrades are an opportunity for us to have a discussion with ourselves around all of that. And I find, usually speaking, except for like potential little hotspots, Jupiter retrogrades often are pretty chill. Now, don't quote me on that if you're sorry in advance if I'm wrong. Your mileage may vary. But generally speaking, Jupiter retrogrades are relatively pretty chill. Because again, this is the greater benefic. This is the chief planet of benevolence. And so oftentimes a Mercury or a Jupiter retrograde can just represent less bad. Not necessarily less good. just less bad. Okay. So that's what's up with that. But coming back to our Mercury trine Jupiter at 15 degrees, right? Isn't it interesting also that we have Mercury in this trine now over in Virgo, a few signs away, also in an earth sign, but in those same degrees, I don't know, it's just cool. Mercury trine Jupiter, dope. Uh, Excellent time for future tripping, excellent time for looking at your big plans and considering things, making adjustments. And then again, we have Jupiter stationing retrograde later in the day. Very, very benevolent, very auspicious lineup, I feel like, of astrology here. Um, uh, Mercury and Jupiter together are sharp and broad thinking at the same time. Can we overdo it? Yes. Yes. There's always the potential when Jupiter is involved to overpromise, uh, what am I doing? Overdo it. Just like take on too much, assume too much, promise too much, all of that. Yes. Yes. But this is also a day where if you are in need of a little optimism, some hope, some expansive thinking, some looking all the way out to the horizon type thinking, this is a really great day to call that in and to utilize that for, whatever schemes and machinations you're needing to get up to. Okay. Then on Tuesday the 5th, the moon will scooch into Gemini, and that's everything for the astrology of this week. See, that's what I'm talking about. It was like hardly anything at all. All right. So, that said, let us now briefly look at what our holy days are this week. We're going to scooch through these, um, relatively speaking, because there's a group of things that I want to focus on this week. So first of all, I'm going to talk very quickly about our heliacal risings that we have this week. Last week we had 0. This week we have 4. Okay. Or 3, excuse me. Casual. So on August 31st, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Thuban. And Thuban is a pale yellow star in the tail of the dragon, or the Draco constellation. Um, the word Thuban comes from the Arabic word Thuban, which means large snake. It also has been called the dragon's tail and as Adib. Now, this is interesting, right? We have an ongoing multi-week thing about serpents and snake imagery and all of that stuff, right up even into some people thinking that the Leo constellation symbol, or the Leo symbol, not the constellation, but the Leo symbol, looks like a snake. Looks like other things too, right? There's multiple conversations here. But here's what I think is interesting about Thuban. Thuban is a relatively inconspicuous star in the night sky. However, at one time, it was the pole star between the 4th and 2nd millennium BCE. So about 5 to 6,000 years ago, 4 to 6,000 years ago, it was the pole star. So at one point, Thuban was a guiding light. Okay. That's what I want to put a pin in there, is that at one point, Thuban was a guiding light. Okay. So then skipping to September 4th, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Zosma. Zosma is a pale yellow, blue, and violet triple star on the back of the Lion or Leo constellation. Another traditional name for this is Zosma. Which is from the Greek for girdle. Put a pin in that. The other traditional name for this is dur from the Arabic, meaning the back. It was also referred to as the backs or the ribs, but the girdle is what I want us to focus on. Then on September 5th, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Coxa, and this is on the hip of the lion. So we have our first fixed star, which is the tail of the serpent, but at one point a major guiding light. Then we have the girdle, then we have the hip. Now, collectively, this probably doesn't sound like much, but for me, what this is bringing in is thinking about the girdle as a sacred clothing item that was worn as a representation of power and magical prowess by women and femmes for a very, very, very long time. It has the girdle, the belt uh, that like holds the belly, kind of item, is something that has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands and probably tens of thousands of years, for as long as humans have been making clothing, basically. Um, and we have to remember that one of the metaphors that we are working with in the background and in the foreground is the sacred goddess being wildly pregnant at this time of year and about to give birth to this massive harvest at Mabon season, the grain harvest turning into the fruit and vegetable harvest, where Earth, northern hemisphere, goes ham, as the kids say. And so I'm thinking of this pregnant woman wearing her sacred girdle, or a pregnant person wearing their sacred girdle, right? Wearing their sacred belt that would support and hold the belly. And that protectiveness for the baby inside, but also that reinforcement for the strength that that pregnant person needs to continue to do their work while they're crazy pregnant. Um, Never having been pregnant myself, I am imagining this stuff. But the girdle, again, is a magical item. It is a magical tool and a magical piece of clothing that we see women and femmes wear as, again, a symbol of power, a symbol of status, and a magical item in and of itself that would imbue them with abilities, or protection or whatever. Collectively, that's really important to me. Okay, so now then, let's take a moment and look quickly through some of the holy days of this week. On the same day as our super full blue moon, August 30th, we have from our friends and ancestors in Peru, the day of Saint Rose. And Saint Rose is an iteration of the Virgin Mary, the goddess within the Virgin Mary, basically. An extension of her, a lot of them, but and she's connected deeply to a lot of the indigenous natives of Latin America as well. Okay, so then the very next day, August 31st, from our pagan and Catholic friends, we have the Feast of Mary Mediatrix number 2, because we just had one a little while back, so this is the second one. um Mediatrix of all graces. This is a title that the Catholic Church gives to the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, of course, right? So, uh, multiple days, and we have another one here. September 1st, the Day of the Virgin of Remedies, from our Catholic friends and ancestors. This is yet another iteration of the Virgin Mary, aka the Mother of God, for that particular religion and group of people. And so, hi again, we're going, into the final days and weeks of summer, headed towards fall equinox. This really powerful symbol of the goddess giving birth and, being, again, swollen, super duper pregnant at this point. And here we have one after another of days that are recognizing the goddess, the goddess, the goddess. Is that it? No, absolutely not. From our Yoruba friends and ancestors, we have the Igogo festival, which is held annually in September to honor the Queen Oronsin, a mythical wife of Rerengenjen. And so this is a day dedicated to celebrate multiple. It's sometime in September. I place it at September 1st. It's a 17-day festival, a 12-day procession honoring this queen to the extent that um, the high chiefs of the Owo kingdom dress like women with beads and beaded gowns and plaited hair and everything else. Like everything is dedicated to this stream of energy, basically. Is that everything? Absolutely not. On September 3rd, from our Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have offerings to Harsis. Oh, actually, I'm not mentioning that one. Sorry. Forget that. Scratch that. Okay. Um, Moving to September 5th, from our Greek friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of the Heroines. So we don't have a whole lot of energy or information about it, but we do know that there's something going on at this point. Oh, this is what I missed. Sorry. I'm all over the board here, as usual. From September 1st to 4th, we have the Eleusinian from our Greek friends and ancestors. Now that this is not the great Eleusinian mysteries, those are coming up soon. The Eleusinian was a Thanksgiving festival held to honor Demeter for the gifts of grain. Not held every year, but there was the greater and the lesser. But this is yet another holiday dedicated to a goddess energy, a mother goddess, a goddess that oversees the harvest and the delivering of all of this stuff, September 1st through 4th. September 4th through 12th, from our Eswatini friends and ancestors in Swaziland in Africa, we have Umhlanga, or the reed dance. And this is a week-long or an 8-day festival specifically dedicated to only maidens who have reached the age of marriage. And they participate in this festival as a means of kind of letting everybody know, hey, I've come of age. And I start to see me as an authority and an adult here in community. So again, another festival that's sort of emphasizing this goddess leadership energy in women and femmes. And then, last but not least, or almost last but not quite least, we have the. Is that it? That might be it. No, the procession for Sobek on September 5th, where he goes to see his mother, Neith, right? More mom stuff. Some of the other things I was going to mention actually are going to fall on next week. But all of this collectively, what we're seeing in this week and what we're going to see in next week, these are the festivals. This is a collection of the festivals that are in alignment with the full moon that falls within Virgo season, the season that is dedicated to the great goddess, the great maiden, grain goddess, harvest goddess, delivering goddess, vegetation goddess, the goddess who has ripened, the goddess who is full, the goddess who provides, like all of that stuff is here. And in the entirety of this last portion of Lughnasadh season, as we move through Virgo, we see these multiple iterations of the goddess as these great beings that are overseeing the wholeness of what it is to be on Earth. Last week, we had a whole bunch of holidays dedicated to goddesses that were iterations of the magician and sacred knowledge and sacred wisdom and holy wisdom, gnosis, all of that stuff, right? We talk about Sophia and who else? There was a few different ones. There was Ahis, etc., etc. So this week, we're seeing a whole bunch of holidays that really focus on the goddess as the mother of God, the mother of deity, the mother of the thing that's happening or the stuff that's coming into being. Um, and and at the same time, we have these fixed stars overhead that are talking about the great sacred girdle, right? That would hold and protect and reinforce and strengthen the belly of potentially this great pregnant being that is about to deliver a big fat harvest to us. Big fat baby of tomatoes and pumpkins and corn and squash and beans. Delicious, delicious baby. The other couple of things that I wanted to mention about this week that are happening from our Orthodox Catholic friends and ancestors, the liturgical year begins for them. Very interesting time period, right? We just went through multiple weeks of holidays at the beginning of Lughnasadh season of gods having their heads cut off, right? The crouching god, the crouching darkness, like Kromdub, all of that stuff. And now, boom, here's the start. We had our Egyptian holiday, that is the beginning of the year. We have Rosh Hashanah coming up very soon, the beginning of the Jewish year. So the liturgical year also finding its start at this time of year. The another goddess holiday. I was like, I knew there was another one here and I totally forgot it. September 2nd, from our Greek friends and ancestors, we have Korotrophos, aka child rearing, honored along with the two goddesses who protect women and children, Hecate and Artemis. Yeah, just that. I'm sure it's a coincidence. Uh, so we have these three great goddesses who literally oversee walking through the gateway. And that is about where we are on the path, right? We are about to leave summer and walk through the gateway into the dark half of the year. And these great goddesses are birthing us into that process and holding the gateway for us to cross over. The last thing that I will say about this week is from September 2nd through the 29th, we are moving into the tree month of vine. The vine month is a time of harvest, obviously, from grapes to the fruits of the northern regions. The vine produces fruits that we can use to make the most wondrous concoction called wine, obviously, and big fan of vinegar. But that's me. Virgo moon, always bitter. The Celts called this month Muin. The vine is a symbol of both happiness and wrath, passionate emotions, both of them. The vine month is a great time for doing magical workings connected to autumn equinox, Mabon, which we will be getting to here in just a few weeks, to celebrate garden magic, but also to look at the darker aspects of the mother goddess. And that's where we are headed, right? As I just said. You can utilize the leaves of vining plants to enhance your own ambition and goals during this month. That's some great spell casting stuff. The month of vine is also a great time for getting balanced. And so, we're going to talk about those themes more as we get closer to Mabon and, in that class and get closer to that stuff. But as I just said, we are standing, in a sense, at the threshold of leaving one half of the year and stepping into the other half of the year. That's partly, to me, why the shift from summer to fall is so potent, and in the same way that the shift from winter into spring is so potent, because we truly cross the threshold from the light half to the dark half of the year. These are the last days of this year where the days will be longer than the nights. After September 21st, for those of us here in the Northern Hemisphere, the nights will be longer than the days, and they will continue to get longer. And again, we'll talk about this more in the Mabon class. But I think it's important for us to understand the threshold that we are approaching. And again, Let me stand up for my Virgos out there. I think that this stuff is really embedded in us on a biological level. And I will also talk about this more in the Mabbin class. But I think that this is part of why Virgos get a little bit of a bad rap for being uptight, persnickety, hyper vigilant about details and things like that. It's because deeply embedded in us, we know that there is a point in the process where the abundance is not going to last forever. The production is not going to last. The sun is not going to last forever. The heat, the light, the warmth is not going to last forever. Stuff is going to shift. The wheel is going to turn. So in this moment, it's this golden brilliance, right? But there is this creeping darkness around the edges that is coming. And some of us, this is our favorite time of year. So, that's also it. Like we this is Halloween. All right. It's spooky time, bitches. Let's go. We're almost there. But these great goddesses that we're talking about, this goddess energy that we're talking about in these multiple iterations over the weeks of Virgo season, oversee this shift, right? And so they're each kind of stepping forward to give us a piece of advice on like how to deal with everything that's coming in, how to deal with the abundance, how to deal with the harvest, how to deal with the oncoming darkness and the shift that we're going to experience here on planet Earth. Because once it starts to go, it goes fast. And then all of a sudden it's October, and all of a sudden it's the end of December, and all of a sudden it's, freezing cold January, February, March again. And, right? So that's where we are in that process. And this, I think, is an entity that's sort of overseeing that. And the Celtic tree month of Vine is also something that kind of assists us in that work. Okay, so those are our moons for this week. Those are our, that's our astrology for this week. And those are our holy days and fixed stars for this week. So I think for us, the Nine of Pentacles is a really great card to work with this week. You could also work with the Eight of Pentacles. I think that would be totally appropriate as well. In terms of the astrology, it's about abundance. It's about, finally seeing some results from our efforts, finally seeing some turnaround, from the work. And we also have just a little bit of astrology with that Mercury trine Jupiter just before Jupiter stations retrograde, that is really assisting us with our work, our production, getting our word out into the world, and looking at the blueprint, looking at the big picture, seeing what adjustments we need to be making in these moments of adjustment, and then proceeding forward with the harvest and the work of the season that we're in. The Eight of Pentacles is very much about doing our work and doing it well. And the Nine of Pentacles is very much about witnessing the results of our work. So either or both of those cards, I think, are totally appropriate to work with this week. For our witchcraft work, I definitely encourage harvesting ethically everything that is appropriate. Definitely harvest ethically anything that if you're growing it, harvest away. Go check out your local farms, go check out your local pea patches. They might be giving stuff away. They might be happy to have people come and help. There might be some very dope bartering opportunities there as well. But harvest, pull in. If getting your hands dirty and literally working with fruits, vegetables, and nuts in a harvest setting is not something that's possible for you, which is real, take some time to do some journaling and take an accounting of everything that you've done this year. Every place where you didn't slide backwards, that counts. Every place where you paid a bill on time, even though money was tight, that counts. Every place where you encountered something that could have triggered you, but you didn't, you weren't triggered, and you regulated and you kept a hold of yourself and you dealt with it, that counts. So all of that too is a harvest for us each year. What have we accomplished emotionally, uh, you know, psychologically, spiritually? All of that counts too. So take a moment to think about that and to call some of that in for yourself. It's real easy to just race from moment to moment and job to job and body to body and like gig to gig, and this, take a moment, take a moment. Saving seeds at this time, even if they're just something that you utilize on your altar as a symbol, very appropriate at this time. Doing anything, any type of veneration towards any goddess. If you work with any goddess or goddesses, this is a great week for just putting out an extra bowl of water and lighting a candle and being like, you're my main gal. What's up? Making corn dollies, also very appropriate for this week, and doing any kind of healing work in this week is very appropriate if that is magical work that is appropriate for you to do. But you might even do some work around, like, putting a sigil or a rune or a magical symbol on your prescription medication, or, like you're dealing with sore muscles or something, like put some magical symbols on your icy hot, right? Or whatever your ointment is that you're using for your sore muscles. Like that counts. That's that too. Or lighting a green candle or a blue candle and bringing your medication, or bringing your lotions or your CBD, oil or whatever it is that you use, and just bringing them into focus, like lighting that candle, bringing your medicine and your healing tools over to that place, and sitting in silence and just seeing that energy radiate around these tools that you utilize for healing. But also, our journal prompts for this week: write a letter of thanks to a healer, living or dead, and either send the letter if the person is alive, or burn the letter to release it if the person has passed on. These are all very, very appropriate at this time of year, especially with that big fat moon in Pisces. We want to tap into that energy. All right, my friends, that is the podcast for the week. I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you really enjoy this full moon. Let it shine down on you all week, even though technically it's only the first couple days that are the full moon. Whatever. If you're at a Bumbershoot in Seattle, come say hi. If I'm free, I'll come and say hi. I might be busy. I don't know how it's going to go this weekend. People might be partying, and I have no idea. So come say hi. We're on the map. Um, my books are open for September. If you can't come and see me at Bumbershoot, or if that type of a setting is not right for you for getting a reading, my books are open for September. I do astrology, I do tarot, I do consultations. Let's talk. Um, and folks that join my Patreon, they get discount codes, and folks at the higher levels get readings with me every month. So, let's do this shit. We are about to go into the dark, y'all. These are the last notes on the piano of summer. These are the last cups. Drink deep of this season, because the wheel turns. Blessed be.